Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jackie Clark, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am so excited to welcome yet another wonderful guest. And as always, we're going to go straight over and say, do you want to introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and where you are in the world?
Yes, so I am Eileen Porzuczek, and I'm currently located in the US, in the Midwest region, in Indiana. And who I am, I would say I'm a lot of things. I would say I'm a writer, I'm a poet, I'm a painter, marketer by day. I am a fighter, a survivor. I'm also a dog mom to a rescue golden doodle. So absolutely a dog lover all the way. Um, so yeah, I would say I'm a lot of different things.
Oh, okay. I love that description of being a lot of different things. Like, I think that that is in itself such an incredible thing because a lot of people, when they're asked who they are, they go, "This is my job." And it's like not an encompassment of who you actually are. So thank you so much for starting us off in such a beautiful way. I am a fellow dog mom and absolutely love my fur babies. So definitely some common ground to get us started. But let's dive straight into your healing journey and let's go right back to the beginning. And you tell us, when did it actually start for you? Like, what was the moment of breaking? Cannot be it. I'm like, this is not what we're doing. Like, what was that moment and how did you get there?
So I'm gonna go back a little bit further before this even happened because no, and this may be something that other people experience as well, but in my life, when before that moment kind of happened, where I kind of woke up in my own in my own life, um, there was almost this weird foreshadowing that leading up to it, I personally didn't see, but then once it kind of all came to a head, I was "W- like there has to be something connecting these dots because this is absolutely crazy." So this is back in 2018. Um, the rapper Mac Miller, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he had overdosed and died. And me and my partner at the time had never really listened to his music a ton. But because he had passed, we had this interest in looking up his music videos. So we had looked up some of his music videos, and there's one of his songs is called Self-Care. And in the music video, he is in a coffin and he takes a pocket knife and carves memento mori into the ceiling of the coffin, which means remember you must die in Latin. And then he punches in the ceiling of the coffin, allows it to collapse on him, and he emerges out of the debris and continues to sing. So, a couple weeks after that had happened, and we had quite literally watched that music video every single day leading up to what happened, and even the night of what happened, prior to what happened, I was sitting on my partner's bed while he was making some tea for us, and the ceiling right above me, and quite literally, when I say right above me, only right above me, collapsed. And when it collapsed, I was mid-sentence. So a lot of stuff landed in my mouth. I was knocked unconscious. I was under all of the insulation, metal, wood, all the nasty stuff that was in the ceiling. And he had to pull me out, and I don't remember a ton, obviously, from when I was unconscious like that. But when he did pull me out, the first thing I remember was thinking, oh, I can't breathe. Like something is stuck and I can't breathe. I'm probably going to die. And he was trying to do the Heimlich on me. And this is going to sound really cliche, but it was kind of like that moment of making peace with that possibility of that happening and thinking at the time I was a college student, so thinking I'm never going to graduate. I'm never like there's all these things because I was 21 at the time. So I'm like there's all these things that I'm never going to get to do, and that's kind of like racing through my mind. Eventually, he had done the Heimlich hard enough that what was lodged came out. And I was able to catch my breath before that point. And I remember him just looking at me with the palest face, like the palest face I had ever seen. And so I knew even though I had thrown up all the nasty stuff on the floor, that like something was still wrong. And he just kind of looked at me and he was like, you need to go to the bathroom right now. And so I'm like, don't know what that means. So I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My whole face was just blood, like just blood all over my face. So at the time, I'm like trying to dab off some blood. He's looking for my phone because my phone is also buried, to call my parents. So they're aware of what has just happened. And as I'm blotting my face, realize I can't feel the left side of my face. I have absolutely no feeling on the left side of my face. Cannot feel absolutely anything. And so in that moment, I felt like something is seriously wrong if I'm not able to feel any touch. So we end up going to the ER. And in the ER, they did some scans, found out that there was stuff lodged fairly deep in my face, and that I needed to go see a ENT. And um, which, if you don't know what an ENT is, it's an ear, nose, and throat specialist. And so I remember the next morning waking up and taking the bandages off. I was on a ton of pain medication, and I remember calling my dad and saying, I need you to find me a doctor. Like, this is really bad. My face was quite literally the next morning starting to rot and turn like crusty and black, almost like a tar, but it was my face. And that was less than like 24 hours after. So I knew that if something didn't happen, if I didn't do something fairly quickly, that could potentially spread and be even worse. So he ended up finding a ENT who is also a plastic surgeon. And I remember he came and got me from school because I also couldn't drive because I was on pain medication. And we went to her office and she probably looked at my face for maybe 10 seconds, it was not very long. And she said, we need to do emergency facial reconstruction tomorrow morning. And so I'm sitting there like, and at the time it was really hard for me to process because everything's happening so fast. Like the ceiling collapsed on me. There's stuff in my face. I can't feel half of my face. Now I'm being told I have to have stuff reconstructed because the stuff is lodged so deep. So I ended up having to do that. And she ended up finding insulation, metal, and like not chunks of wood, but like splinters of wood, 2 inches deep in my face. And she had told me that if it had landed an inch or so more to one side, the entire left side of my face would have been permanently paralyzed. And that if my cheekbones weren't as strong as they were, it would have shattered my cheekbone and made a hole through my face into my mouth. So they ended up taking all, like getting all of that out for me. And I had to have, because it was so deep that they had to cut through my face, I had, I think, like 7 or 8 layers of stitches because they had to do so many layers on the interior and then the exterior. And so I, instead of thinking like that healing at that moment was my biggest concern, I was more concerned that my professors would think that I was lying, that I said a ceiling collapsed on me. So I was like on pain. I remember I was on painkillers and I'm like sending emails. I'm like, I'm actually at the doctor. I will send a note, blah, 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 blah. I like had made a promise to myself that I was going to apply for grad school as well. And the deadline for that was coming up. So I'm on my computer, I'm doing stuff, I'm sending these emails, I'm applying to grad school, and my mom is finally like, what are you doing on your computer? Like, you should not be on your computer right now. And I'm like, oh, well, I just applied to grad school and I just did, and she was like, you just need to like, let's close it and let's take a step back. Those things will be there. You don't have to be stressing about that in that moment. And I ended up having to be away from school for 2 weeks, to heal. And I couldn't really do much. So I wasn't allowed to eat any meat or dairy. And one of the things I did learn is not the whole pineapple, but specifically the pineapple core is really good for healing bruises and healing your skin. So they had me eating 1 to 2 pineapple cores a day to try and help with the healing. And so if you've ever like had a pineapple core, it's kind of like hard and not the best thing in the world. So I was using them to make smoothies. So I would have pineapple core smoothies, which made it a little bit easier to digest versus the hard, nasty center of the pineapple. And so all of that, then I, my biggest concern too, like when I was healing was I'm 21, I'm in college, and I don't have the funds to cover all these insane medical bills. And all I was doing was sitting upright on a bed. And so now I was kind of left with all of that. So in conversations with the, because it was a rental that my partner had lived at off campus. So, in conversation with the homeowner and the property management company's insurance, they both collectively told me that what happened to me did not matter. It was not a big deal. And that if I thought that it was a big deal or anything, that I needed to just have an attorney contact them because otherwise they were not going to take any sort of responsibility. And so I felt like I then had two options. I could either allow them to decide that fate for myself, or I could sort of take matters into my own hand and roll the dice and see what happened. And so I decided to lawyer up, and I ended up in a 26-month lawsuit. And it was one of the most, like, one of the most psychologically warfare type situations I would say I've ever been in my entire life. And I don't think when I made the decision to go down that path that I felt would bring me my own justice, I don't think I fully realized the gravity of what I was getting myself into at the time. I just felt that how can they say this? Like I wasn't doing anything. Like I have done nothing wrong. And I just don't want to be in medical debt because I was sitting on a bed at the wrong place at the wrong time. And so throughout that 26 months, there were a lot of things that were really hard. I had to do a 3 hour, and like basically they interrogated me for 3 hours under oath. And there were two of them because there was one representing the homeowner, one representing the property manager, and they kind of played like this good cop, bad cop type thing. So one of them went first, played good cop, then one of them went second, played bad cop. But the thing that was really clear to me was that it was obvious I had done nothing wrong. And my lawyers had sent like a building engineer out there to look at the house, and the reason why the ceiling collapsed was because there was water damage and the roof wasn't properly maintained. So clearly not, once again, clearly not within my control, not my fault. And the whole time with anything that they would say or try to do, it was just them trying to paint me as a difficult woman, an overly emotional woman, a liar, I mean, anything that they could throw out because if we didn't mediate, yeah, it was, which this is also like just so ridiculous to me. If we didn't mediate this, my case would have gone to a trial with a jury. And so they were just in their, and from their mindset, they were trying to think, how can we paint her as X, Y, or Z? So if she's ends up having to sit in front of a jury, how can we make her look bad, like a bad person? And that was also really hard for me because prior to all of this, I felt like I was someone who was very just blindly trusting. You might say naive. And so it was hard for me to come to that realization of these people, one, don't care, and two, they're wanting to do everything within their power to ruin my reputation, ruin whatever they can for their whatever that gain would be. And so all of that. And then there would be times too where my lawyer would be like prepping me for stuff. And there was one situation where I had to go to, it wasn't my deposition, it was something else. I had to go do like there's a fun law that if you are the one suing, the people on the other side of the case can have you go to a doctor of their choosing for an exam. So I had to go do that because otherwise they could throw my case out. And I was like, I have not been in this case for over a year now to just let them throw something like that at me and then throw out the entire case. And I remember when my lawyer was prepping me for that, he had told me from the second you walk in the door, there will be people watching you. And there, I mean, there were people watching me, like, and he said another thing, whatever they ask you to do, you just smile and you say yes. And if it's inappropriate or wrong, we'll deal with it later. And that was also really scary because it kind of took away some of my autonomy to protect myself because I was then in a situation where if I don't smile and just say yes to whatever it is, then once again, difficult woman and whatever else they can say about me. And so that was something that was almost made me feel as if in some of those moments I was operating more from a robotic state than a human state because it was like, okay, I have to do this, this, and this. Um, and that was also hard because coming out of it, I felt like I didn't know who I was because for 26 months I had been in that space of just literally trying to survive. And so at the 26 months, the end of it, we ended up being able to mediate. So I thank goodness did not have to go to a jury trial. But it was still pretty horrific as far as the accident and the lawsuit together. And mind you, while this whole lawsuit is going on, my face is still healing. My face took about a year and a half to heal, and I still have permanent nerve damage. So like this um region of my face and this half of my lip, I can't feel because it didn't hit a major facial nerve where it would be the whole side, so it's just a portion. But yeah, and my facial doctor had put the scar line on my smile line here. So it's positioned in a place that makes it a little bit harder to see. When it was first healing, it was a giant red line on my face. And but now it's a lighter color just because it's had more time to heal. But one of the things that I definitely still try to do is like my whole facial routine has changed. So every morning it's like I put zinc on my face, my foundation, my makeup foundation is tinted sunscreen, just because whatever sun gets there, it will just redarken that scar. And when I returned to school and I had the scar and it was more prominent on my face, I felt like anytime that I went out in public without makeup on, or even with makeup on at times, people would just, I felt like that was the only thing that people looked at. Talking to me, having a conversation, that's the only thing they're looking at. Not talking to me, just staring from a distance, that's what they're looking at. And that was also something that was very uncomfortable for me because I had never had that type of attention where it was almost as if people, for lack of better words, were gawking at like, oh my gosh, like I wonder what happened or look at like, and I just really didn't like that.
Oh my gosh, that's like so many things in having to be injured where it physically changes your appearance and you have to go through that healing. Like that's already a big thing. But then going through the lawsuit as well, and that idea of like psychological warfare is so apt for what a lawsuit is. And again, that like being so young and being so trusting, and then having this kind of rude awakening really quickly that the world is not what it seemed, and there are people who genuinely get paid to do bad things and make you out to be somebody that you're not, and kind of shift that whole dynamic like that, all must have been really, really challenging at such a young age and also over such a long period of time. Like a lot of people talk about like soldiers getting PTSD and stuff like that. And actually, situations like this in, on home soil are the exact type of situations that would cause um, that same kind of trauma and stress that a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
people sort of look over and don't really think about actually that, you're going through a very similar kind of psychological game all the time. So, like, firstly, I'm just really sorry that that happened to you. Like, that's really challenging. And then, how did you go about, I want to say, like, finding yourself again, like coming back to yourself, like embracing yourself again as you kind of went through that journey?
hmm So first, before I answer that question, kind of to what you said about the post-traumatic stress thing. So that was something that was really hard because I did have post-traumatic stress from the accident with the ceiling collapsing on me.
Mhm.
And when I was in the lawsuit, it was as if I was in this perpetual cycle of pre-post, 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 because I would have to do something and I'd have to go and essentially relive it. And then, okay, there's like 4 months or something, go relive it again. And so it got me in this really bad cycle of that. Also, one of the things that they had wanted to attempt to use against me, it didn't work, is that prior to the ceiling accident, I had been, when I was in high school, had been in a bad abusive relationship where there was physical and mental abuse. And they wanted to make what they thought was a compelling argument. It was not that because I had existing post-traumatic stress from being in an abusive relationship like that, there's no way you can possibly have a second form of traumatic stress, which, yeah, you're laughing because, yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, which that was another thing they tried to do, which really was hard as well because I don't choose to talk about that situation as much, or at that time, I didn't choose to talk about that situation as much because there's a lot of shame and feelings that came along with that. And so, them also kind of constantly bringing that up from my perspective, it doesn't have anything to do with the ceiling collapsing. Why are we talking about this? But yet, it was a topic of conversation. So just kind of wanted to share that with your comment about the post-traumatic stress. Um, but as far as finding myself, there was a lot of healing that I had to do. And prior to this, the ceiling collapsing with the abusive relationship, I had done a lot of what I would call white knuckling, where I refused to go to therapy, didn't want to go to therapy. I'm fine. I'm this, I'm that. I don't need it, in a very like defensive space. So when everything ended, I finally let go of those white knuckles that I had been holding on to for so long and got into a routine of regular therapy. I also, in addition to that, did EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy. And I did that for 3 months, like a very intensive 3 month period. And before I did it, I had talked to a couple people that I knew that had done it just to get some information. What was your experience like? What could I expect? Type of thing. But I do not think anything could have prepared me for what my actual experience going through that would have been like, because it is I mean, it's up there as one of the hardest things that I've had to do. Um, Partially because when you go through trauma, your brain will try to protect you and sometimes block out or black out things that you it doesn't feel are great for you to know. And when you go through EMDR, you're essentially ripping the band-aid off of that, and you're sometimes learning things that you didn't remember or didn't know until you took the time to sit down and really reprocess those experiences. And I remember in my first meeting, she had shared, and I actually have my notebook here because I wanted to make sure I shared this correctly, but this thing called the change triangle, which basically is an upside down triangle. So we have our defenses over here. So everything that we're telling ourselves, I'm not going to feel this, I'm not going to do this, that whole space. And then in the other top corner, we have all of our shame, guilt, and anxiety. And then we're sitting up here at the top and we want to move down to the bottom. And at the bottom is where you're connected, you're courageous, you're confident, you're very clear-headed, all of that. But to get there, you have to work through the triangle. And in the triangle are all of those emotions. So anger, joy, sadness, excitement, disgust. And even though it may seem like all of those emotions can't possibly be in a traumatic experience, they 100% can. There were times throughout my experience where I felt disgust. There were times where I felt joy. There were times where I felt excitement. There were times where I felt anger. So it really is working through all of those moments, all of those feelings, all of those things. And I remember in one of my sessions, I did remember something that my brain had kept from me. And it really, when I found out, it was something that really kind of bothered me. So I didn't remember at the time, but remembered that one of the things that I did, once again, to not seem like a difficult woman, whatever they would want to call me, but after my deposition and after things that I would have to do where they were pretty much like verbally abusive, I would stand up, shake their hands, and thank them for their time to seem so they couldn't say anything bad about my attitude. And when I remembered that I had done that, standing up, oh, thank you, that really hit me hard and bothered me just from the standpoint of I stood there and shook the hands of my abusers in the same room where the abuse happened, minutes after the abuse happened. And that's not something I would choose to do, I would want to do as a person, but it was something that I did in that robotic state of this is what has to be done, this is what I have to do, this is how I'm going to survive, da 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 da. And so that was really hard. But yes, therapy, EMDR. I also did a lot of meditation on my own, and box breathing would be really helpful when I would feel a lot of anxiety because there were triggers that weren't triggers before that I had. I mean, the hardest thing was how do I sleep in a bed again? Because this happened to me in a bed. So how do I sleep at night? I can't sleep on a couch for the rest of my life. Like that's just that's not good for my body. So how do I get into a space where I can comfortably be in a bed and not have all these chaotic emotions of fear and anxiety? And so that was a huge thing as well. And also with the psychological aspect of it, there was a lot of work that I had to do learning to trust again. And so I would say for a while after that, I was a very closed off person. I would say I'm still probably more closed off than I was prior to all of this, but I'm definitely more open than I was at that time.
Wow. I mean, it's again like for everyone, the journey is different. Like for everyone, what they need to do and how they need to go about it is always different. But I think a lot of people um, don't actually recognize how good things like healing therapies, so things that are somatic, things that are, rapid eye movement or moving trauma through your body or, actual energy release. Like a lot of people don't realize how beneficial they can be for the process of healing and how much our body stores within us on a kind of subconscious level. Like, as you said, things you didn't even remember happening that you just kind of blocked out and you didn't really want to remember, acknowledge, or know that they'd happen. But your subconscious still knows. Your subconscious is still programming from a place of knowing that that is true.
Mhm.
And at some point, when we feel safe, we've got to be able to get to that point where we can actually look at that and deal with that and move that through and do something with that. So I think it's really incredible. Like, firstly, it takes time. You don't just have these big things happen and then immediately be like, oh, I'm ready to go and deal with this and step in therapy and sort this all out. Like, there's a process that you have to kind of let yourself go through and let yourself feel all of the things. And I love the fact that you said, like, there was a duality in what you were feeling. Like you were feeling really good, but also really bad at some times. And I think a lot of people again kind of misinterpret, like as humans, we are complex beings and we can feel multiple things at once. It's not a case of like, oh, you can only feel one thing and you can't, it can't be anything else. I think that was one of my kind of biggest realizations when I was going through my own healing is at moments I would be, so deep in grief and depression, and then something would happen and I'd be so happy. And it was such a contrast of trying to understand how all of those things could exist inside me and all be true because they
And
just didn't feel
sometimes
like,
even
yeah,
like simultaneously, you're feeling sad, but you're also happy, or it's not like a linear thing. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I had that exact same experience when I was going through my healing, and it was so it was so difficult to understand because I think a lot of people in the society that we live in have this very linear way of describing your life when you're a child. You go to school, you do good, then you go to uni, you do good, then you get a good job, then meet the man of your dreams, get married, have 2.5 kids, get a dog. All will be good in the world. You kind of go through this, like it's a very set out linear this is the way that life should be. And I think when you go through these big sort of traumatic events, and suddenly not only are you trying to deal with that thing, but you're also trying to grasp and come to terms with the fact that that path that you thought was so dictated for you and how everyone's life should be is suddenly not going to happen anymore, and everything's going to be different, and it's not going to be how you expected. I think that that also adds a layer of trauma. It adds a layer of healing. It adds a layer of like, oh, actually, how do I now wrap my head around what the next thing is and how we kind of go through this? And I guess Like I always wonder for my guests, like what was the biggest kind of outlook change for you? What was the biggest shift of like what you thought to what was now the reality of what you knew the world to be?
So before everything with the ceiling happened, I would equate my human state at that time to being asleep. I was 100% asleep in my own life. Didn't know that I was asleep, but I was. And at the time, to the partner that I mentioned who I was with at the time of the accident, everyone in my life did not like this person. Did not like this person, did not want me to be with this person. But I was so determined to be with this person. And in the aftermath of things, that person ended up choosing to leave me, not wanting to be there for some of the harder things. And I think, in a way, the accident woke me up in that relationship because if that hadn't happened, I quite possibly could be married and divorced by now to that person. So, in a sense, in that way, I felt as if I woke up. This is not, this is not how I would want someone to be as my partner. I would want someone who supports me when things are good, when things are bad, like not someone who's just there when the weather's good type of thing. And so that really woke me up in that sense. I feel I kind of already mentioned it, but the naiveness that I had, awakening from that, that there are a lot of great people in this world, but there's also a lot of not so great people. And the discernment between that. And I think also learning to accept myself a lot more. And I think where a lot of that came from was I really struggled for a long time. I called, which this is silly. That's why I'm like laughing. But after it happened for a while, I called my new face like my mask. So I was like, this is my new face. This is not my face. Like, and I could tell all these differences. Like when I would look in the mirror, other people probably couldn't. But to me, I would look in the mirror and feel as though my eyes are sitting different. My this is sitting different. This is sitting different. I don't like it. I just want my face. This is not my face. And that was a very long journey for me as well to get to a place where I don't call this my new face anymore. This is my face. And learning to accept myself in that way, that having those imperfections or having the feeling loss isn't something that I need to feel shame about or isn't something that I can't accept myself for. So I feel like there was a lot of self-acceptance that came with that. And also, I think another big shift was as I said at the beginning, I'm kind of a creative person, like painting, like writing, like I got more into those hobbies that brought me joy as I was healing because they helped ground and center me. And so I poured more of myself into those things that I liked that I wasn't always pouring myself into, which was really awesome. And I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but even to the point where I have a whole collage of tattoos on my arm that tell my story. So I have a lilac, but the stem of the lilac says memento mori, so symbolizing my death, the rebirth. And then I have a wolf a portrait of a wolf. And I got that one to symbolize the strength that it took for me to get through everything. And the reason why I chose a wolf is there's a lot of things in folklore about women being strong wolves and women who support other women being wolf packs. There's a lot of different iterations of that and a lot of different books that talk about it if that was something someone wanted to explore. But that was the reason why I got that. And then I also got a tattoo of a brain, and the brain is raining onto an aloe plant to symbolize all of the hard healing work and stuff that I went through as far as getting my body better, getting myself better, just in all aspects of whatever. And I just think that all those things together in what I would call my awakening have made me more peaceful and brought me more inner peace. I think another thing too, and this might make me sound a little harsh, but I feel like it also shifted my view in life can be so short. I had no idea that ceiling was going to collapse on me. And I have no idea if something like that could possibly happen again. And if it happened again, I have absolutely no idea when it would happen again. And so just that indication or reminder that life is so precious and all the moments that you have with the people that you do care about and you do love are so, so important. And when there are people in your life who aren't, I guess for lack of better words, aren't fulfilling that healthy space and are fulfilling more of a toxic space, it is 1000% okay, whether it is a family member, a friend, a colleague, whatever the relation is. The relation doesn't really matter. It is 1000% okay to remove that from your life because life is too short to one, be putting yourself in that situation and or allowing that type of energy to affect you. And I'm sure there would be a lot of people that would say, "Oh, like you shouldn't do that." But I that's something that was a big shift for me that I do feel very strongly about now, just because I've been shown like life is so short.
I think it's a beautiful way to live in deeming that life is so short. As long as you don't pull it in a toxic way of like, I'm not going to look after myself. I'm not going to save any money. Like, I'm just going to like blow everything because life is too short. Like, obviously, there's a toxic way to do anything, isn't there? But I think that thing of so many people get stuck in this thought that like, oh well, next New Year resolution, next summer, oh well, we'll do it in the winter. We'll like, there's just always like a time frame of like, yeah, we can do that in the future. Because I guess there's a part of us that believes that we'll always have another day, that we'll always have another, especially when you're young and you're healthy. Like, there's so many reasons why we're programmed in that way. And obviously, if we were all programmed to think that life was super short, then we would never evolve and we would never, better ourselves as a species and all of that stuff. So I can absolutely get the logic of why we need to kind of have that longevity built into us. But at the same time, I absolutely believe the same as you. Like, life is really short. And if we don't live now, like, what are we doing? Why are we wasting our time in living in a space that we don't enjoy, or not doing the things that we love, or not drinking out of the crystal glasses because we're going to save them for a favorite occasion? Like, there's so many things like that where I look at it and I'm like, actually none of that makes sense. Like, wear the nice clothes, use the nice linen, like do all the nice things, make yourself feel as good as you can every single day. because there's something really powerful in that. There's something really special in that, rather than just sitting around waiting for the perfect time or the perfect opportunity or the perfect person or the perfect thing in order to actually live your life. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with having that outlook in life and saying, actually, you know, regardless of how long I'm here, I'm going to live every day as if, we don't have any more, and we need to make sure that we're appreciating the people around us and the things that we have and the life that we get to live. Because, like, whenever people say to me about like aging, like, oh, I'm so old, I get really angry actually, because I'm like, actually, you're so privileged. Like, you're so privileged because there are too many people who have passed away too young. There are too many people who haven't had that opportunity to actually go through that natural process of aging. And for everyone that has, like, every day that we're here is a blessing. Every day that we get to live, every day that we get to go out and chase our dreams and try something new and just enjoy the things that are around us, like, that should be seen as such a blessing. And I think if more people lived like that, we would have a much happier society. We would have a much better world that we would get to live in. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that idea. I think it is just that thing of like not letting it become a toxic, like, oh, well, there's no point because life is short. I think like there's got to be a really fine balance in what, like,
Exactly.
the money income we take because life is short, like the like grasping at life and wanting to live it to the fullest. I think that is the message. And when you're in healing, when you're in a really kind of like difficult place, I mean, I'm sure with PTSD, depression, like all of these things, there's a similarity in that it kind of robs your joy a little bit. Like, it takes away that ability to look at something and go, oh, this is so great. Like, it just feels like you're lying to yourself. I know that's how I felt when I was going through my own depression. So I guess, like, I would love to hear like your advice for somebody. So if somebody's going through something like this, I mean, whether it is the exact situation that you've been through, whether it is, just a lawsuit or another trauma, like, what would your advice be for somebody who's going through something tough and looking at how they can kind of get to the other side?
Yeah. One of the biggest things I would say is therapy. I think that can make a huge difference. It allows you to have a space to just talk about your emotions, work through your emotions. So, whatever that therapy would look like for someone, whatever they feel would be best for them in their situation, I would 100% say therapy. I would also say meditation. If you are feeling anxious about something, whether it's anticipatory or in the moment, to take a step back and either do meditative box breathing for a second if it's something in that moment, or if it's anticipatory, take 30, 45 minutes if you can and do some type of guided meditation to recenter yourself. That can be really, really helpful. I would say also one of the big things mindset wise that helped me was when hard things happen, like it is so easy to want to curl up in a ball, crumble, and just fall because of all of the weight of all of those emotions that we have as humans. But if you allow yourself to go into that whole crumble and fall and be sitting there in your hole with all of these emotions unsorted, that is only hurting you. And to avoid hurting yourself in that way, even though you may be going through something that's super hard, whether it's like a ceiling collapse like I went through or something else, whatever it is, as hard as it is, you have to pick yourself up and do whatever you can, even if you're doing things that are just temporary to get you through that next day, to get you through that next month, whatever that time period is for you. Figure out what those things are, pick yourself up, and get yourself through that because otherwise you're letting either another person who inflicted something on you win, or you're letting that trauma win. And personally, from my perspective, I believe that the biggest middle finger and the classiest middle finger to anyone who has ever doubted you, harmed you, wronged you, whatever the scenario is, the biggest middle finger is regardless of what you're going through, picking yourself up, staying healthy, and being successful in whatever brings you joy. Because at the end of the day, that person or that trauma or that thing or whatever it is couldn't get to you. It can't control you. You are in control of yourself. And so that was huge for me from a mindset perspective. And so I would say trying to channel a mindset similar to that can be really powerful as far as thinking and thoughts. And like I said, if there's something that you have to do that you wouldn't normally do, but it's going to get you through that whatever period of time, do it. That's okay. Like it doesn't have to be something that you do forever.
Absolutely. I think one of the big things that people underestimate when it comes to healing is what I like to call radical responsibility, and actually being able to just step out of that victimhood, step out of that place of putting your power in other people's hands, and actually say, I am in control of how I respond to all of these things. So I might not be in control of the situation. You couldn't stop the lawyers or control the lawyers or make them do anything different, but you could control how you behaved in that situation and the outcome that you got in the end based on how you behaved. And I think that that's always the really kind of defining moment for a lot of people in their healing journeys is that moment where they actually stop letting themselves play the victim and they actually step into that space of responsibility of saying, actually, I'm not going to let somebody else decide this for me. I'm not going to let somebody else, dictate how my life is going to go. I'm not going to stay in this situation or with this person or, in this environment or in this job or whatever the thing is that's causing the problem. Like, actually, I'm not going to let this be the end of the story. I'm not going to let this be the thing. And it's so interesting because my older sister is an absolute medicine geek, and she always talks to me about the body and like all of the amazing things it can do. And I will never forget the first time that she told me that our bodies, basically every single cell in our body, is brand new every 7 years. So the person I was 7 years ago is no longer the person I am now. Like, physically, it's like it's not that's not a thing. And when I was going through my own healing journey, that was something that like resurfaced in my brain, like as a random fact out of nowhere, like this like guiding light of like, actually, the person I am right now, the person who's struggling, the person who can't get through this moment is not the person I was 7 years ago, and it's not the person I'm going to be in 7 years from now. So actually, if I could decide who that person is going to be in 7 years' time, who would they be? What would they be doing? What would that life look like? And I think giving yourself that ability to put yourself back in the driver's seat when you're in a place where you feel kind of out of control and everything feels like it's outside of you that's influencing your life, there's something really magical in that process of saying, like, actually, I'm going to write the story. I'm going to be the person who says that this is how my life is going to go and this is what's going to happen. And taking that responsibility is such a powerful thing. So, like, I absolutely love that as an idea as to how people can start to like move through this. Okay, so final question. This is like one of my favorite questions that I always ask people because I think it's really amazing for our listeners to not only hear the journey and how far you've come, which has been absolutely incredible, but like also to hear that there's always a level of healing. Like there's always something that you're looking to better or like keep growing within. So I always ask people like, what is your next level of healing? What is the thing that you're working on at the moment? Yeah, tell us about that.
So my next level of healing is I have decided to take my experience, and I have taken all of those emotions, all of those things that I went through, the accident, the lawsuit, the actual healing process, and I have written a poetry collection that is a memoir told in verse. So it goes through the whole experience of the different types of trauma and my healing. And one of the big things with that's what I'm personally working on right now as far as next level of healing is my own courage to put that out in the world, be vulnerable. This is this podcast actually is one of the first times that I've shared this story. So courage for me is a huge thing right now, finding that inner strength to be courageous and talk about this, share it with the world. And for me, that is something that's important to me because if my story can just touch one person, help one person, I'm happy that I talked about it. So that's something for me with my next level of healing, and my collection with my story and all of that will be coming out this year. And it will be on pre-sale starting April 7th, and it will be officially released August 8th of this year. And if you're wanting more information on that, I do have an author site. It's just my name, eileenporzuczek.com. And the publisher where you would be able to get it on pre-sale can be found at finishinglinepress.com. But it's interesting, like as this is kind of approaching, I have a mix of emotions because I'm like very excited that I did this thing and I took this really awful thing in my life and I've made it into something beautiful. On the other hand, it is scary to put that level of vulnerability out into the world. And so really just finding my inner courage and strength as far as that. But my hope is that hopefully what I went through and the wisdom that I've gained from it can help someone else on their healing journey.
Oh, it absolutely will. It absolutely will. I think that this is absolutely incredible. And as of when the podcast is going live, we will have the link below where you can pre-order the memoir. So you can click on the link below and obviously get involved with that. I think that that is so incredible, being able to go through that process and do something so good and so powerful with what you've gone through. As you said, like if it can just help one person, that is incredible. And you've already been so courageous. Like doing the work to actually write the thing is courage in itself. And coming on the podcast, like I've been a guest on this podcast. I had somebody interview me about my story and I felt nervous and I run the podcast. So it's, I absolutely get how guests feel when they come on this journey. So just a massive thank you for coming, for sharing, for being so open, for writing the memoir, for sharing the pre-sale link with all of our listeners. Like it's just been incredible to have you and to get to know you. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. And thank you for having me. I think this podcast as a whole is just really important. I think there's a lot we can all learn from each other if we just kind of slow down and listen. So I think the work you're doing with this podcast is really awesome.
Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of The Diary of Discovery.
If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Diary of Discovery.